It almost never happens. But sometimes your group experience in MMOs like World of Warcraft don't go very well. Underperformers, AFKs, really long AFKs, poor tactics, a bad comp, or a bad connection. And then there comes a point where it's time to just call it quits and then try again with another group. World of Warcraft stands out with its Mythic Keystone Dungeon feature, which is a co-op experience with an arguably competitive social structure behind it. Outside of guilds and dedicated groups of friends is the sort of Wild West, a zero-sum game to fight for spots in a decent group, and boy, that group better do well or else. The basic rules of Mythic Keystones are pretty simple. You form your group, you throw in the keystone thingamajigger, and you beat the time. But the very nature of Keystone Dungeons build pressure, meaning that any reason a run might not go well is likely to make one or more members of that group just want to up and leave, because they only have the resolve to win. You can't blame them. Over the years of Mythic Keystones, the pressure and the outcry to do something about early leavers escaped the lips of players burned by such an action. Because nobody likes their time being wasted, which is in fact a reason to leave some of these groups, but that also hurts those who were left behind who would otherwise settle to at least finish the dungeon. What can we do about early leavers? That's going to be the topic of today's design discussion. What can be done about this sort of behavior? So, hey, it's Soul, this is a video, yada, yada, yada. And I thought this would be a fun subject to take on, so let's get right into it. Fixing the idea of early leavers is not unlike a behavioral correction. It's impossible to bring the number of leavers down to 0 because the game can't literally control people. There are plenty of legitimate reasons to leave a group early. A sudden emergency is a pretty good one. Maybe your friends popped online and are ready to go for their Keystone Dungeon and they're just waiting for you, and they don't have a lot of time. So in that case, it's pretty messed up, but that's still a reason to bail on that pug so you can play with your friends. The behavior that we're going to try and correct is a bit more nuanced, where it's not a question of if you have to go, but more like if you no longer have the resolve, if you feel too discouraged to continue on. Motivation is a key factor in our desire to stay in a group that, after a few mishaps, would question our faith. How do we motivate players to stick around? The short answer to that is reinforcement, and I'm going to cover the two sides of behavioral reinforcement, positive and negative reinforcement. Positive being like, I don't want to leave, I want to complete this dungeon for a thing. And right now it's for the glory and the gear and the valor and the great vault stuff. By contrast, negative reinforcement would be, I shouldn't leave. I'd better complete this dungeon or else. In the conversations that I've been observing across the internet, negative reinforcement, aka punishment for leaving, has been the more popular suggestion to prevent people from leaving. In trying to be an outside observer here, though, I think that feeling comes mostly from personal experience, because certainly most of us have some story to tell about someone leaving, whether it was a dungeon or a raid or in some real life event. This happens all the time. No one likes being bailed on, and in a way, seeing that offender get punished is a form of catharsis or Schadenfreude. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it's like, yeah, that person, they got what they deserve. That's what they get. One form of punishment many of us in World of Warcraft are familiar with is the Deserter debuff, a 15-minute timeout that prevents you from queuing up for random matchmaking content, including dungeons. In theory, a Deserter debuff of sufficient length should discourage a player from leaving. They might as well stay for like the Valor or the whatever, right? This is by far the most talked about form of punishment, but simply copy-pasting this into Mythic Keystones, I find that to be a wasted effort. Because consider what the Deserter debuff affects. It affects queued random matchmaking, which is the only way to enter battlegrounds and arenas and the dungeon finder. A Deserter debuff isn't very effective in the pre-made group tool because you don't need it to run Mythic Keystone dungeons, you just need it to help find or start groups. For it to actually work, the deserter debuff would have to pretty much disable the ability for that player to activate a keystone dungeon, period. So for example, if player A is in a keystone party thing that just started, and for whatever reason, maybe they leave early and they receive that deserter debuff, that's going to mean that regardless of the length, if they were to immediately join another group, that entire group is now unable to start their dungeon because, quote, one of their players, as in player A, has that deserter debuff. This sucks in the event that player A wants to leave that pug in favor of joining a guild or a group of friends for dungeons, meaning that everyone just got punished, including player A, the group that they left, and the group that they're now trying to join. With a deserter debuff, there's the question of how breaking a group would even work. Like if there was a consensus that, oh, this run's borked, let's not waste our time. And like, how do they part amicably? I think that if the entire party, while online, if they were all to just up and leave the dungeon, like walk out, it would then be safe to break the group. Another possibility, maybe there can be a command to vote to abandon that requires a yes from all players, and once that's done, the key depletes and all is well. Or is it? With a deserter debuff like this, we create a not so new possibility for toxic player behavior. Because let's say that we're at the start of a run, and there's a hiccup. An extra pack of mobs was pulled. Maybe most of the group is okay with this, but that one person is not. They feel like, OMG, this run is ruined. Now with a deserter debuff, they can't just leave unless they really don't care about getting that debuff, but what they can do is just stop participating and keep bugging the group to leave the instance so the group can break, or keep initiating that vote to abandon. That's really all it takes. Now feel free to leave a comment with a silver bullet solution, but try as I might, I just couldn't come up with a fair way of punishment. Short of a deserter debuff lasting a full lockout, this gives all the power to that one player who feels like they should leave. And obviously the rest of the group isn't likely to oblige just for the sake of that person leaving that they don't get a debuff. It's like, oh, they want us to be nice? Sheesh. This begs the question, will a debuff actually curb this behavior, or will it just redress it? Or maybe a deserter debuff in this form just doesn't work. So instead of the deserter debuff that we're familiar with, let's have the server remember how many times that you have left groups just over the course of a week. So pretend that you're a career Mythic Plus person, and throughout the week, you've left 2 out of the 10 dungeons that you've run so far. And based on that sort of record, nothing happens. There's no punishment necessary, just kind of move on with your life. But now let's pretend that you've left like 6 out of those 10 dungeons that you've run. I would like to think that's pretty extreme. I'm just using this as an example, so don't worry. But in this situation, the server will then flag you as a frequent leaver of groups, or a deserter, whatever you want to call it. So if you happen to later participate in the group finder, the pre-made group tool, whatever, whether you're a group leader or someone trying to join a group, the players there can see this debuff of yours, and then they can make their own judgment call as to whether they want to join you in their group, whether they want you in their group, or if they want to join yours. I'm not going to get all mathy or specific. I really didn't think this far enough, but I can see something on the back end, like this system that tracks your runs in a given week. And if the system knows that you left a large number of groups, you get this new kind of a deserter debuff. It should be designed mostly for people who run lots and lots of keys, so there'll be a grace period and a minimum number of dungeons run before it starts counting against you. And there should be something where you can push that debuff off once you complete more and more dungeons to kind of water it down. It'd be kind of dumb, right, if you signed up for your first dungeon of the week and then you left for whatever reason, and now you're just hit with the scarlet letter. You're totally screwed for the rest of the week. That shouldn't happen. And I say week because this tracker would also wipe the slate clean every reset. So this sort of record isn't going to show up on the armory. There's not going to be a record for add-ons like Raider.io or whatever to scrape and then track how many times you've been a naughty little dungeon person. But personally, I'm not fond of negative reinforcement in the slightest because, I mean, come on, this is a video game and we just want to play, right? Like, obviously part of this game is social. Keystones are largely about making groups that can successfully run and complete things together, and I strongly feel that positive reinforcement, even if it's imperfect, is the better route to take. So here we go. Here's another idea, another flawed and unoriginal and totally ingenious idea. Here we go. Let's blow your mind. Commendation points, or gold stars, or whatever you want to call them. I'm going to call them points. Here's what happens. At the end of a dungeon run, you get like a victory screen, not unlike when you complete a warfront or an island expedition, like ta-da, da-da-da-da-da-da, you know, it's a screen with your whole party, with pictures and names and a snapshot of your avatar, class role, yada, yada, yada. The game will then compel you to choose 2, maybe 3 people, not including you, of course, who deserve a point. And you have to be there to give or receive a point too. But here's the twist. No matter how many points are passed out, no matter how many any one player gets, at the end, the game will only care if you got points at all. So I lost you, I know. So I'll repeat the example. It's the end of a run and everyone gave out their 2 points per person. Now on the back end, the server sees that, oh, the healer got 4 points because they're really awesome. And the DPS got a few points, cool, and the tank got 0 points because the tank was me, and I suck, oh well. Those tallies are hidden, we don't see them. As for what the players see, all they're going to see is that somebody in your party gave you a point, congratulations, and those people will take away 1 point from that run. And the tank got nothing, and they go home with some hurt feelings, I suppose. This is a very soft system of commendations that avoids scenarios where a team of friends can, you know, like where they would funnel points to each other for reasons, and I haven't even gotten to the purpose of points. This allows for scenarios where, for the most part, it's likely that just about everyone is going to receive a point, and in the scenarios where someone does not, it's probably because they deserve it. I think that mostly depends on how many points each player can pass out, whether it's 2 or 3, whatever. Now, of course, what do these points do? We can think of it like the revamped deserter buff that I mentioned, but sort of the opposite. As you play and complete dungeons and hopefully earn points, people making groups can see how many points that you've earned for that week. I think that these can be reset throughout the week because we already live in a world of Raider IO and soon to be Blizzard's own Mythic Plus score. The point system will give a snapshot of a player's dungeons for that week and if they performed exceptionally average in those runs. But these points will also act a bit like honor levels do in Shadowlands. They can be milestones to hit, which after you earn so many, you get, you know, fun cosmetics like titles and pets and toys and mounts. But what does this do in terms of early leavers? It actually doesn't do much if that person has their reasons to leave. That's not the idea here. What it does try to do is incentivize players before the run even begins to maybe be a little bit more helpful, a little bit more tolerant for the sake of that coveted point, which makes the rewards from points really important. It's because it's going to be another carrot that encourages both participation and good play and probably good behavior that is partially in the hands of the party that they joined. I'm not going to waste more time with details other than to say that the rewards have got to be pretty good and very long-term for long-term participation. There are drawbacks and vulnerabilities to something like this, and I'll try to address a few of them. Someone could, in theory, amass a bunch of points by carrying +2s and make people think that, oh, dude, I'm like super awesome and reliable, when they try to join that, what, +18 or something? Since points reset in a week, that's quite possibly a big waste of time though, and someone is likely to see if they look deeper into their IO score or whatever that they've timed no higher than a 5, so whoop-de-doo. More legitimately though, this does punish players who play later in the week. When that person tries to join or start a group, they may be overlooked in favor of someone else who has a handful of points, even when everything else is even. Raider IO and the Mythic Plus score, that's going to be in play, which again makes points matter only so much. Still, this does leave those who play late in the week at a disadvantage in that group building phase. The problem with levers is not an easy solve. If it was, we'd have it already and people would shut up. I'm sure fans are almost split down the middle as to which is better, positive or negative reinforcement, or if a little of both would be more ideal. The danger of taking this on lies with the human variable, the inevitability that people out there will use systems to their advantage, leading to this cat and mouse game of designing more solutions to new problems. Maybe what I've talked about is even too much already, but I would love to hear your folks' thoughts on this in a comment below. If you have the perspective, hey, I would love for you to share what other games do to curb these sorts of problems. Of course, I would love it if you were to like the video, because you're nice, and to subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.